Welcome back to Sonic Creations, everyone. The official Sonic YouTube channel has dropped a 35th anniversary sort of video going through a bunch of the games with this new Live and Learn remix. It really feels like we're getting close, maybe, to some announcements. I don't know if they're going to be new game announcements, but it seems like they're gearing up to celebrate this year being Sonic's 35th anniversary. Now, what is it also the anniversary of? That I'm not sure was properly acknowledged. Sonic 06. And this is something I mentioned in my previous videos as of late. I just feel like Sonic 06 has been on a lot of people's mind, not just because of Project 06, but because it's been 20 years and we're still talking about this game. It clearly has earned its place in the franchise and has had sort of a comeback where even newer fans are appreciating what it was trying to do back then. And so I guess with this new next gen era we're about to enter, where we're kind of gearing up for the next Sonic 06 type experience, my question is, what can we really expect from this next Frontiers styled game, whether it's called Frontiers 2 or it's Sonic something else, some other subtitle? I want to go in and break down sort of what I want. What are the things that I really am hoping are going to be present in this next game? I'm not going to be talking about any potential remasters or remakes because until we get something announced, that's irrelevant to talk about, and I've already talked about that enough. So I'm not going to be getting into any potential like Sonic Heroes remake. I think it would be a good time for that, but there's just nothing that's telling us that that's coming other than like some leaks from a year or two ago. So I'm kind of done with that whole side of things, but I'd really like to focus on the next Frontiers game and actually get into what I want from the open world, the traversal, the combat, and the overall tone, and what characters will be involved, and is it really going to be something that they're trying to tie in with the movie and match the movie, or is that something they're trying to leave behind so that they can focus more on what's important, which is really just making their franchise, the game franchise, the best it can be. I'm kind of leaning more towards the latter, and I think Sonic Team is as well. I think they announced somewhere, I don't remember where it is, so forgive me if this is incorrect, but from what I've heard, they're not really trying to align their game releases with the movies. So just because there's something movie related happening doesn't mean that the game is going to have to be released at the end of this year, right? Which is why some people are predicting a 2027 release date instead of a like fall or winter release date for this next game. I want them to take as much time as they need, and I think everyone would agree that this is something that cannot be messed up, cannot be rushed. We all want this to be the best thing that it can be, and to be as polished as it can, and especially if it's going to be something with multiple playable characters, which if the Final Horizons is any consolation, that's definitely going to be the case, right? They're definitely leaning towards, hey, this is a feeler, we're kind of testing the waters to see if you guys even really want other playable characters and if that's still something that does well, and also to test what they can do with that gameplay wise. So we all know that more playable characters are coming, it's just a matter of which ones. Knuckles, Tails, and Amy, that's highly likely that they're going to be included as playable characters, but I wouldn't say that for certain. And this is where I kind of miss Sonic Adventure's style. Now hear me out with this, because I know this is initially what everyone was complaining about when Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 first came out, was that we don't like the treasure hunting, we don't like the shooting, we don't like, we just want Sonic gameplay. But I think adding a little bit of variety, because yes, technically Knuckles can go through a Sonic level, and it would be a little bit easier for him since he can glide and climb, but how does that apply to an open zone formula such as this? It's like maybe Knuckles should stick to his treasure hunting thing. Maybe they should design his levels around something that represents his character, which is being a treasure hunter. And same goes for a character like Rouge as well. And maybe they can be a little bit more combat focused since they're much stronger characters. They're kind of identified as power characters, at least in the adventure games. Of course, once we get to Sonic Heroes, Omega is the power character and Rouge is just the flight. But I think that there's got to be a way to like not just make them alternative skins of Sonic, and make them a little bit more unique with their gameplay and also the missions that you do with them. So it's something that I hope that like if they are present, they have a purpose, right? It's not just, oh, you can can play as Knuckles and do the same exact things as Sonic. I hope it's that you can play as Knuckles and he has his own purpose in the story and his own types of missions that center around his strengths, because that's what you really want. You want Knuckles to feel like he has a purpose being there. And maybe this is just me, this is just the feeling that Final Horizons gave me, but they were just floating around in a limbo, and there were these color-coded platforms that would tell you, okay, this puzzle is meant for Knuckles to solve and this puzzle is meant for Tails and Amy, and I just didn't like that sort of very direct, unnatural feeling gameplay design, and I think that there's a better way to handle their characters, and the blueprint is in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, 100%. And knowing that they're not as concerned with what the movies are doing at this point is kind of relieving, and it also reminds me that, okay, when I talk about what I want from these games, I don't have to constantly consider what the movies are doing. Like, just because Metal Sonic and Amy are going to be really big characters right now does not mean that Metal Sonic and Amy are going to be in this next Sonic game. So I kind of want to get more tuned into the game canon and less of what the movies are doing with their canon, and say, what do I actually want, right? If we're disregarding the movies, what do I really want? Well, I think there's a couple of characters that would fit really well into an open zone formula, and that is Silver and Blaze. These are characters that have been absent for a long time. Frontiers is like Silver and Blaze coded, meaning I can really understand how they would fit into a narrative such as that. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go back to the Starfall Islands, but it's very possible that there's still some cyberspace theme going into this next Sonic Frontiers style game. And so with that being a highly likely possibility, right? You have to remember as well, we didn't even get to play as that final transformation of like Cyber Sonic, or whatever you want to call it, Cyber Super Sonic. Whatever that was, we only got to see him kind of go all out in a cutscene. So we only got to play as the Super Sonic with the blue eyes and the red aura, but we never really got to play as this like frenzy version of that, where he just goes completely out of control, almost like a Fleetway Super Sonic mixed with a Dark Supersonic. It was very interesting to see, and I just wonder, like, why bring that transformation in just for a final cutscene in Final Horizons and a DLC, which people probably see more as the definitive ending than the original ending, and not bring that back for some potential future final boss. You know, it would just be kind of tone deaf to me, you know? Like, they say they don't want to add Hypersonic because it creates a power scaling problem. Well, you're already doing that now with Cybersonic, so you might as well integrate it and expand on it. Give it some strengths, give it some weaknesses, allow us to see how the other characters react to Sonic in that form. Maybe write some sort of narrative around that of how that cybernetic energy is affecting Sonic emotionally. So narratively, there's a lot you can do with that, and gameplay wise, there's a lot you can do with that. And I think for those reasons alone, it's worth bringing back. So that's one thing that I want, along with Silver and Blaze, is I want that Cyber Sonic form where he goes all out. I want that to be a playable form in some final boss or something like that. Next, if this is going to be similar, where we are traversing from one island, one open zone to another open zone, going to different environments, I think some form of hybrid of what Sonic Unleashed did whenever you were traveling the world throughout the story campaign. Of course, once you unlock all the locations at the end of Sonic Unleashed, you can just select them. But I really appreciated that they added those levels where you and Tails were on his biplane and you were flying through the air and you were gunning down Eggman robots, and you actually got to see how they got physically from one location to the other. That is very cool. And I think that is something that I'd want to see, especially with today's technology and SSDs and what's possible. I think that they could do it. Imagine traversing as Supersonic from one location to the other and flying through the air at a supersonic speed, like actually feeling like Supersonic, not, oh, it's just a Sonic skin and you're a little faster and you're, you know, you can glide around a little bit. No, let's actually show what Supersonic feels like when you have full control. I love those boss battles in Frontiers to death, and they're some of the best boss battles in Sonic in a long time, especially with how cinematic they feel. But they're very controlled, right? You can only do so many combos, you can only fly around or have so much control. It's a very controlled environment, and I guess as it should be, right? The Sonic Adventure 2 final boss with the Bio Lizard with Supersonic and Super Shadow, Shadow, that was a very similar to Frontiers. You know, you're in this confined space, you can fly around, but you can't really go that far, you can't really go that fast. You're just there to do the one task. Like Supersonic is just too out of control to put into gameplay form. It's almost like the same issue that Superman has and why we haven't seen a Superman game. I assume that having a fully controllable Supersonic in the open zone would be a similar issue, but I think they should find a way to make that work. So yeah, I guess I'll add that in too, that not only just for the traversal from getting to one island to the next or whatever it is in this game, I would also want to be able to use Supersonic, like to be able to unlock that and have that control in the open zone itself. Next, and this is something I'm hoping for all future games, while Frontiers was really good, I think we've yet to experience a really sinister villain that raises the stakes and that actually makes people more engaged in the story again. I think a problem with Frontiers is that yes, it was very somber, it was very reflective, it was very emotional, but at the end of the day, all the characters had to come together to figure out how to solve this problem. It was very Sonic Adventure 2 coded in that way. I think that this franchise can pull that card. It can pull the SA2 card where Eggman has to work with the heroes, right? But you shouldn't pull that card too often, and I'm sure they know that, but I think that we need a more sinister Eggman, or we need a more sinister creation of Eggmans, right? So like either he creates something that goes out of control for him, right? Maybe Sage upgrades herself and has this new transformation and she's the new villain, and like she allows herself to get completely overtaken by her negative side. So something that will challenge physically the heroes, but also challenge Eggman emotionally if we're gonna continue to go down that path. I don't know if I want the villain to be Eggman in this next game. And that may sound like I'm contradicting myself, because I'm like, I want there to be a more sinister villain, and I don't want them to always pull the SA2 card where Eggman's working with the heroes, but I don't want the villain to be Eggman. Well, maybe Eggman should be put on the back burner. I don't know, but I just don't think he needs to be in every single Sonic game. That's just me though. So I think that's what I'd want them to do. Either you go further down Eggman's emotional path where he has to make a choice of whether or not he's capable of going against his own sort of daughter figure in this AI that is Sage, right? I think that storyline is very interesting. He created this thing that he has love for, and now he has to go against it because it's gone against him. So it doesn't necessarily mean he has to team up with Sonic and his friends, but it does mean that he's not the main focal point as a villain. Now I think that could switch around in the final act of a story like this, and Eggman could come in and say, oh, well, now that you destroyed Sage, I could have saved her. And Sonic's like, well, she was gonna destroy the world. We didn't have a choice. We had to put an end to her. And then Eggman goes back to his villainy full force. I think that sort of bait and switch would be great for this next story, or just for the future for Eggman, is that losing this daughter figure will take him back to that villainy that he has within him and bring out the worst in him. For the next couple of games, he could be menacing in a way that we haven't seen in forever. That's something to think about as well. Where could they narratively take Eggman as a character that doesn't break his character, but can maybe take him back to form in a really emotional and well-written way, versus just, okay, he's evil now, we're done with the whole Sage storyline. You know, I don't want them to just like do these dry switches. I want to see how these characters evolve, and that's something I want for the future. And I guess where I'm going with this part of what I want, since we're talking about what could be next for the Sonic franchise, this is what I'm really hoping it is, because as a fan of Sonic and as a fan of movies and TV shows and character-driven drama and narrative itself, I want to see this franchise do better in those areas. I want to see this franchise feel connective to the next and to the next, right? Like, I want these characters to feel like they're carrying over the past events that happened in the previous games. And that's something that it's always been bad at. Kind of part of what I love about it, that like things kind of feel reset even after a very dark game like Sonic Adventure 2, for example. We can swing back around to something like Sonic Heroes, and then we can swing to something like Shadow the Hedgehog. But that kind of mood swing type deal clearly hasn't worked out for them in the broader sense, you know? And I think that I can look back and I can defend that. But at the end of the day, do I really think that's the right way that they should be handling the narrative for Sonic? No. I think we all prefer when things feel more connected, because that's what they claim is the case anyway. Everything is canon, right? So if all narrative is canon, and in Sonic Frontiers, Sonic is referencing all different kinds of canon, like IDW comic lore, and he's pulling from the older games as well. He mentions characters like Jet. It's like, well then, we shouldn't just see them in games like Crossworlds. As much as I love Crossworlds, by the way, that's like made its way up to one of my favorite Sonic racing games. It's awesome, and the character interactions really make it, especially not just in the cutscenes, but in the gameplay. I really appreciate that attention to detail. I just want to see more of that in the actual narrative of these Sonic games coming up in the future. So that is what I think is the crux of this video, especially me being a narrative-focused Sonic channel. I really like talking about these characters, and clearly I love writing them myself, and that's why I'm very passionate and I'm very hopeful that they will take the narrative seriously. And I'm not saying it has to be so serious that, you know, it's ridiculous and it kind of loses self-awareness. That's not what I want. It's just that in the meta era, things were too self-aware. There's a balance, right? There is a balance, and they're starting to find it with games like Shadow Generations, which was beautifully handled, and I love the narrative there. The problem is that took place back in Generations. It took place in the meta era, technically speaking. So it doesn't really feel like that's moving forward, right? At least not right now. So what I'm waiting for is a AAA Sonic game to show me that narrative matters and we're taking it seriously and there is continuity, and from now on we're going to pay more attention to that detail. I trust Ian Flynn. I think he's a great writer and a great choice, and has proven himself to be the one to take the helm in guiding this narrative. But of course, even he is under the directorial control of Iizuka-san and of the executives of Sega. For example, I know Ian Flynn really wanted Hypersonic, and I'm still burned about that, as I'm sure a lot of people are, but they just said, no, we don't want to make this too much like Dragon Ball. And to me, that's like, I don't think Sonic is anything like Dragon Ball. I think there's similarities for sure, and I think they've inspired one another for sure. But I don't think that they're trying to be each other. And I think just because there's different transformations in Sonic doesn't mean that we're trying to do Super Sonic 1, 2, 3, 4, and you know, all these crazy transformations. It's very different. Hypersonic, I don't see as something that's like Ultra Instinct Goku. I see it as something that is more like an out-of-control frenzy. Hypersonic is like all of the different types of chaos energy. It's like negative, positive, neutral, but it's like flashing between all the different types. And so it's only something to be pulled out when absolutely necessary. Tell me how that is different than Cybersonic's final transformation we saw in Frontiers. Newsflash, it's not. It would have had the same narrative impact. So I think this like fear of Hypersonic is weird, and so that's something I want to see them lean more into, is like, don't be afraid to add new transformations, but bring some of the old ones back, for God's sake. I mean, I really miss some of them, you know, and we haven't seen many of them like fully explored. I don't even think we've seen the true potential of Supersonic yet, even with games like Frontiers. I think there's just so much further you can push Supersonic, and so much more you can do with him gameplay-wise. So I think that's the main takeaway, is that lean into the shonen elements, I guess. Don't worry about power scaling, and just allow this franchise to breathe and be what it always was. I mean, look at Sonic Movie 3. Not to bring up the movies too much, but that movie was like a live-action Dragon Ball movie half the time. You know? Like, that's pretty cool. Even the movies get that, like, the action in Sonic is a huge deal. So Frontiers gets it, the movies get it. I think we're going in a more action-heavy style, almost like something akin to Devil May Cry, where there's like speed action platforming, but then all of a sudden there are these combat sections that go really in depth. And I think they should add more combos, and I guess I'll get more into the combat now before we end off this video, because I think it's been a little bit long. If combat's going to be a part of Sonic moving forward, right, and we can expect that from what is coming next, for the next probably 10 years, they've said, right? The next decade at least, we're going to be getting this type of gameplay. Well then, let me give you my 2 cents on what I think that they should do with the combat. And this is my exact same, I guess, issue. And look, Sonic Unleashed is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time, but this is one of my issues with Sonic Unleashed, is that the combat does get repetitive after a while. I do think that there is enough combos there to keep you entertained for a long time, but not for an open world game like they're trying to craft now. And I think the same thing with Frontiers. I'm like, yeah, a lot of these moves are repetitive, and there's not a lot of variety. There's not a lot of feeling of control. Some of them are just like triggering a cutscene and it does all the work for you. I want more interactivity. I want more parrying. Absolutely. I think the parrying was really fun. That was one of the most fun parts of the combat in Frontiers for me. It feels so satisfying to land one, and you feel like you're really fighting as Sonic. It did achieve that. Remember, Frontiers is also one of my favorites too. It's an amazing game, but I think that there needs to be more variety, like I said. This is where the other characters come in, because even if they can't add too much of an intricate variety of different moves and different ways you can pull off these moves, there's a way to keep it very simple without going too crazy with it. And I think that's what they want to avoid. They don't want to make this some complex hack and slash game. They want this to still be a Sonic game at its core, so combat can't take too much of a focus. I understand that. But if you have other characters playable, like Shadow, like Blaze, like Silver especially, imagine how different Silver's combat could feel. Imagine how different traversal could feel. Imagine how different puzzle solving could feel. That's why I think Silver is so Frontiers coded. It's almost criminal if they don't bring in Silver during this open zone phase that they're in right now. He just fits so well. When I play Project 06 and the original 06, all I'm thinking about is, man, this would be so good if his character could come back playable in an official game. I'm hoping they don't wait for Silver to come in the movies before they use him in the games, because then they would be going back on something that they said they weren't going to do, which is allow the movies to dictate what happens in the games, right? They have complete freedom. They're at their most successful they've ever been. They can do whatever the heck they want. I say bring in Silver and Blaze in this next game. Now, it doesn't mean we should riot if it doesn't happen. I'm just telling you what I want, and I think a lot of people want this. Hell, Kishimoto-san literally said he wants Blaze in a new Sonic game. So let's not forget that we're going to be headed in this direction of bringing back old characters and adding more playable characters in general. That's definitely going to be the case. The Final Horizons is always going to be proof of that, and I'll always remind people of that if it ever feels like it might not happen. It will. Another thing is that Sonic Heroes was onto something. If I'm gonna mention it in this video, it's gonna be this. The character switching mechanic needs to come back. Nobody wants to go back to a menu screen to switch out their character, right? Either there should be a designated place where you can go do that in the open zone, or it should just be on command. They're all three present, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and you're controlling them in the open zone together. That would be like the best of both worlds, right? Because then you can switch between their combat. I mean, look at what they did with the Team Blast, right? In Sonic Heroes, where they're all working together to do this really cool move. Imagine being able to control something like that. That's what I'm talking about. The potential of having multiple playable characters present at all times feels like a no-brainer now that I'm thinking about it. It enhances the open zone. It removes this fractured thinking of like, all right, let's make separate DLC levels for Knuckles and Tails. No, how about you just bring them in to the main core group? Or better yet, what if I want to swap out Tails for Silver, or I want to swap out Knuckles for Omega, whatever? You could build your own team and then go solve puzzles and do combat, go through stages and whatnot in the open zone. That has got to be the direction, man. That's what I want. I'm so excited to hear what you guys think and what you guys want and what you're excited about for the next 10 years, because we're locked in. You know, Frontiers is the first example of what we could be seeing in the next 10 years, and I want to see it iterated on in a way that is satisfying, not like, yeah, it's the same game but like a little more polished. No, we want more characters, we want more abilities, we want more narrative. So that's all I'm gonna say in this video. This was a much longer video, but I really needed to get this off my chest because it is so important. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all the way through with my venting slash listing off things that I want, I really appreciate you. Sonic Cybernetics Episode 7 is coming very soon. I'm working my butt off. It's coming together. I'm gonna be releasing the first scene, I think sometime next month. This month got really busy for me. I'm also gonna start streaming soon and might stream the process of me working on the show, so do look forward to that. And if you want more details about what you can look forward to my channel and what I plan to be doing this year, you can check out my update video that I just released a week ago, and I go into much more detail there. But anyway, thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video, creators. Peace out.